Hello and welcome to another AARP Arizona Happy Hour virtual tour. I am Brenda with the Arizona State Office of AARP. We are the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that is dedicated to empowering people 50 and older to choose how they live as they age. With a nationwide presence, AARP strengthens communities and advocates for what matters most to the more than 100 million Americans 50 plus and their families: health security, financial stability, and personal fulfillment. AARP also produces the nation's largest circulation publications, the AARP Magazine and the AARP Bulletin. During this month, AARP will offer events and enriching experiences close to home and from your home that help you make connections and serve others. While our situations are different, our need for connection is universal. Now more than ever, we know that connecting with family and friends is vital to aging well and living longer and having happier lives. Visit us at aarp.org/AZ for more information. Thank you again for attending, and with that, I will turn things over to Marshall.
Welcome to the show. Get ready to meet your host for the night, Arizona's very own hip historian himself, Marshall Shore.
Good evening, and I want to welcome you all to Arizona History Happy Hour. I am so happy that you can join us tonight, and have we got an amazing show for you tonight. But let's go on and talk a little bit about, today is September 7th, 2023. Oh my gosh, the year is going by so quickly. And on this date back in 1935, the Florence Union High School and the grammar school opened its doors. Now they had just gone through a complete kind of refurbished painting, redoing the floors and everything else, adding a playground to the grammar school. They had to close a street off to be able to do that. And, even though that this now on the Register of Historic Places high school was built in 1916, one of these things that's kind of cool is that when they did it, they only decided to do one floor because the school board felt that there had been so many students that had probably walked, run, or on horseback to get to school. And so they figured, one floor was enough for all of those students. They didn't need to be climbing up and down stairs. Now, it is also Acorn Squash Day. So, this is an indigenous vegetable, fruit, I guess vegetable, and it's a winter squash. And, for me, it kind of always brings in, growing up in the Midwest, it was baked with butter and brown sugar and so delicious. So it always kind of welcomes the fall. Now, as we get ready for cooler weather, it's also National Beer Lovers Day as we kind of get ready for Oktoberfest. So, it's a great way to just kind of enjoy a nice, refreshing beverage. It is also Grandma Moses Day, because on this day, she was born. Now, she didn't start painting until her 50s. Life magazine featured her in 1960 when she turned 100 years old. So, you're never too old to pick up a new talent and run with it. So it is also Google Day, because back on this day, back in 1998, they incorporated. And boy, have they changed the world since then. Oh my gosh. So there you have it, September 7th. What's kind of going on? So now what can you expect from tonight? Well, we've got a little bit of trivia. We've got our Arizona music history. We have Little Arizona, as well as, of course, a cocktail and a super incredible guest, which we will bring more about that in just a little bit. So if this is your first time watching, you might wonder, who is that man and why is he on my screen? Well, I got here about 23 years ago from New York City. I was living and working in Brooklyn. I was working at this beautiful Carnegie building, decided to trade the snow, the slush, the wind for a little library in South Phoenix that has a rich oral tradition of the community. And so I started learning about Arizona through its stories, and that continues today. We promptly moved into a beautiful 1956 ranch when we got here to Arizona. It was so many tones of beige on the outside. I am happy to say it is now just 2 tones, seafoam and cantaloupe. Inside the house is pretty much a time capsule with all the original appliances. You can see the oven, the matching stovetop that match all that buttercream yellow tile. Now, as soon as we got here, all I kept hearing about how there was no history here. But, I quickly realized that wasn't true, because no matter whether I went somewhere on foot, on bike, in a car, on a bus, however, I kept running across so many amazing people, places, and stories. And I'm also called the hip historian. And you might wonder, what does that really mean? Well, it means I get to play a lot with Arizona history. Why, I just got on the AZ Speaks, which is a program for the Arizona Humanities. And so me and 40 other actually 39 presenters, can be booked to come across Arizona to talk about a wide variety of topics. So you can check that list out there, and would love to come out and chat with you. All right. Also, Phoenix Magazine, in the issue that's coming out soon, they have named me one of the accidental fashion icons of Phoenix. Also, we are getting ready for the end of this month. I just dropped off some books to some of the readers. So that's going to be a really fun night at the Alwyn House on September 29th. And just next week, we're starting to take photos already to help promote the 95th anniversary of the Orpheum Theater. So that's going to be a lot of fun. We'll be doing Arizona Unzipped, which is an educational burlesque show. And I finally figured out my technical issues. And yes, indeed, I now have started putting up some of the episodes on Spotify. So they are now podcast and should be migrating over to iTunes as well. So you can track them down. You can find the videos archived on YouTube, also Spotify now, and hopefully soon iTunes as well. So I see many have already found the chat. I love to hear from you all. So please chat away, ask questions, make comments, as well as if you have something after the show, or maybe you have a great idea for a speaker, you can always reach out to me through Facebook, Instagram, email, or website listed right there. All right, so now we get ready for happy hour. And so, PJ basically makes cocktails for me in these great little glasses. They're a lot fancier than what I would make here at home, but they're always super darn tasty. And so for today, we are drinking a Paloma. So this is tequila, Corsico Blanco, fresh lime, Mexican squirt, and black lava salt. Oh, that little hint of salt just kind of really gives it a nice little pick-me-up. All right. So with Little Arizona is a chance to explore a town outside of, Phoenix, Tucson. We've got some great spaces. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about Florence, Arizona, which is in Pinal County, has a population of just over 26,000, was founded back in 1866. And if you go, you can visit a building that is now McFarland State Historic Park. It was built in the late 1870s and has had many roles. It was the first county courthouse, the sheriff's office, the courtroom, the judge's chambers, the jail. Second floor was a jury room and quarters for visiting lawmen. And now you can go through and learn all about some Arizona history by walking through and the history makers. And then you can go see the second courthouse, which, I think is really beautiful. And one of the things I think is really cool is so they have a clock, because that was obviously the symbol that, hey, we're doing really good, but they couldn't afford the mechanism. So the clock always says 11:45. So at least their clock is right twice a day. It is also home to the oldest junior rodeo in the country, dating back from 1932. And it's coming up at the end of November. So some of you should go out and enjoy, because it sounds like a lot of fun. They also done a really cool thing. They have driving tours or walking tours that you can just download and walk around and learn about Florence history as you walk around. And then it has a pyramid. Nearby is Poston, Charles Poston, the father of Arizona. First, he was relocated. He was in the Pauper Cemetery near the Capitol. He then was moved out to Florence, and they built him this amazing pyramid, which you can go visit. And then there is also the Arizona State Prison, which was built in 1908 by inmates. It is now closed and not quite sure what's going to happen with this historic building, but only time will tell. All right, so now is the time where you get to hear a different voice other than just mine, where we get to bring on our oh so special guest. So let me bring on Tom. Hello.
Hello, Marshall.
How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on.
Oh my gosh, I am so excited to have you on. As I was perusing through the book, it was like you're bringing in so many amazing bits of Arizona trivia, and just hitting on so many touch points of what gives Arizona its soul.
Thank you. Thank you. I should say my publisher would be very unhappy with me if I didn't say the title of the book at least once on the air, so I'll say it now and we'll get it over with. It's called Rim to River. Ah, there you go, a helpful graphic. Thank you. Rim to River, looking into the heart of Arizona, a series of 17 essays about this wonderful state that you and many others have fallen in love with.
Indeed. So what was kind of the impetus for this book?
Well, I'm fifth generation. My family moved to Arizona in 1905 to farm cotton, and I grew up in Phoenix and Tucson with a bit of a contentious relationship with the state. I'm a product of Arizona public schools, for better or worse, and I grew up dreaming of going someplace else. And it was only after going back to work in Arizona for, as it happened, the Arizona Republic, and when I was 32 years old, that I began to realize, my sort of youthful disdain for this place was really premature. I need to take a closer look. And the more I looked, the more I found about it to love and celebrate. And so the book is, it's an indictment of some of the less savory parts of Arizona, but at the same time, I think it also tries to be clear-eyed in the things that we can celebrate.
Right. And that was the thing I really liked, was it gets to the underbelly, but also the celebratory nature of some of the amazing things around the state. And they may not be necessarily what people think about.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Sometimes it's those small things.
You got it. I mean, one of the biggest nature writing cliches about the desert is, that it rewards the careful observer. I can't tell you how many times I've seen it. It's really kind of hackneyed. But at the same time, it doesn't make it less true. And the same thing can be said about the human ecology of the state of Arizona, that you need to look deeper past a somewhat uninspiring built environment. That is to say, the stucco seas that characterize large portions of particularly the valley. Some of the loneliness that pervades this state, the lack of mature community structures, the crazy politics, all that. Yeah, that's true. These are not great aspects of Arizona, but at the same time, look a little bit deeper, and you're going to find some very interesting stuff.
Indeed, and that's why I do really much what I do, is because there's all these cool things that are buried beneath the surface, and so it's just trying to extract them and to showcase them and highlight those.
Hmm. Yeah, it's sometimes hard work, and it's sometimes hard work not to lapse into certain cliches.
Indeed. All right. Well, we have a little bit of trivia coming up. Now, we do trivia a little differently here than if you're used to bar trivia, where we're going to go through the multiple choice questions, and then we'll come back and talk about the answers and the story behind the answers. So that's always for me where the fun really happens. Now you can keep track of, I see Anita is joining us. I know she's got her special notebook out. I've got one friend that likes to write his answers on his arm or other bare skin and then send me a photo of them. Also, people keep track of their answers in the chat session. So whatever makes you happy, go for it, because you're the one that's going to grade yourself. We're not going to come in and be like, oh, wait a minute. How many did you get right? How many did you get wrong? That's not the purpose of this. It's just to have fun and learn. I started saying, I was like, yeah, that's TMI. So, all right. So our first question, who is the guy with the shovel in the Arizona State Seal? Is it A, Ed Shefflin, B, George Warren, C, Jack Swilling, or D, C.S. Fly? So if you remember the State Seal, there is a man with a shovel in it. Which one of these gentlemen is it? All right, question 2. What is the lowest spot in Arizona? Is it A, the San Rafael Valley, B, a wash near Tubac, C, Desolation Canyon, or D, San Luis? Which do you think is the lowest location in Arizona? All right, question 3. What's the name of the one uranium mine permitted to operate near the Grand Canyon? A, Striker, B, Mi Vida, C, Pinyon Plain, or D, Lucky Town? Which one of those do you think is the mine called near the Grand Canyon? All right, moving on to question 4. What's the last county created in Arizona? Was it A, La Paz, B, Greenlee, C, Navajo, or D, Mojave? Which county was the last one to be admitted, created, designed for Arizona? All right, question 5. Who built the eponymous fountain in Fountain Hills? Was it A, Del Webb, B, Robert McCullough, C, Ned Warren, or D, John D. Long? All right, so who do you think is responsible for that fountain? Question 6. Elvis Presley filmed what is generally regarded as his worst movie, Stay Away Joe, outside of what Arizona town? A, Scottsdale, B, Sedona, C, Monument Valley, or D, Tucson? All right, question 7. The man who wrote the song The Ballad of Ira Hayes is the son of what novelist who also took Native Americans as a premier subject? A, Oliver Lafarge, B, Leslie Marmon Silico, C, Will Levington Comfort, or D, N. Scott Momaday? So which one of those folks is the son of the man who wrote The Ballad of Ira Hayes? All right, moving on to question 8. The countercultural writer Carlos Castaneda claimed to have met his Yaqui mentor in a bus station in what Arizona town? A, Naco, B, Bisbee, C, Yuma, D, Nogales? Question 9. What famous soft drink was invented in Arizona as a booze mixer? A, Sprite, B, Squirt, C, Mountain Dew, or D, Orange Fanta? And our last question is, what was Barry Goldwater's favorite cocktail? Was he a dry martini kind of guy? Maybe it's B, Old Crow bourbon, C, a classic margarita with rocks and salt, or D, a tequila sunrise. So what do you think was Barry Goldwater's favorite cocktail? All right. Well, while you're all locking in your final answers, we are going to go on for a little bit of a music break for Arizona. And so we are going to talk about the album From the River to the Rim by Loy Klingman. All right. So Loy is known as the father of Arizona folk music. He's a member of the Arizona Rockabilly Hall of Fame. Basically supported his family as a school teacher, but he was also a songwriter, musician, cowboy poet, record producer. He owned Viv Records, which he purchased from Lee Hazelwood. And in 1960, in the 60s, he opened up a cafe in Scottsdale where you could go hear folks like Arizona's balladeer, Dolan Ellis play. So he has also been admitted into the Arizona Music Hall of Fame. So check out Loy Klingman. All right. So who's ready for some answers? I'm sure Tom is. I sure hope so. All right. So who is the guy with the shovel on the Arizona state seal? And that would be B, George Warren. So what's up with George?
Okay, so I'm glad you do have the state seal pictured there. On the left of poor George Warren is the Roosevelt Dam, whose ribbon was cut the same year as Arizona statehood. And Warren himself was a guy who is credited with discovering the Copper Queen mine in Bisbee. And this is one of those Arizona stories that happens to be true. He actually gambled his share in the mine by wagering that he could outrun a horse at 100 yards. And he, of course, immediately lost this bet, and with it, his share in the Copper Queen. He was kind of this legendary, eccentric character around Bisbee. And he later wound up working as a janitor in the offices of the Copper Queen mine that he had once briefly owned. He apparently also later sold himself into peonage to pay off his many debts. One of the decoy answers there, C.S. Fly, is actually the name of the tombstone photographer who took the picture of George Warren, which found itself onto the state seal. C.S. Fly was an early tombstone photographer, a proponent of what we now call photojournalism, who took photos of events as they happened. He's one of the only people to have photographed Geronimo, for instance. Got a photo of Geronimo's surrender to the U.S. Cavalry. He's also known as the guy in whose backyard, or rather the alley to the side of his studio, that's where the gunfight at the OK Corral took place. And C.S. Fly personally disarmed one of the Clanton brothers by pointing a rifle at him and demanding that he surrender a weapon as the unfortunate man was bleeding. So C.S. Fly, most of his prints went up in flames in 1912 when his studio caught fire, but his widow had the good sense to donate the remaining prints to the Smithsonian, and today they're highly sought after. So Arizonans can take pride that the one human individual portrayed on their state seal was a foolish gambler.
Who couldn't outrun a horse.
Who failed to outrun a horse.
All right, so what is the lowest spot in Arizona? And that's D, San Luis.
Yes, we all know the highest point in Arizona, the top of Humphreys Peak. But what is the lowest spot? This answer is a little bit misleading because the low spot is actually not in the city of San Luis. I didn't want to necessarily give this away because I think if I put the full answer, it would have been, gotten by everyone. It's the bed of the Colorado River, quote unquote river, as it exits the United States, 72 feet above sea level. In order to actually see this spot, you have to cross over into Mexico and hike up the bed of the Colorado until you actually cross over into the boundaries of the United States. And the reason why you can't get to it from Arizona is because there's the big border patrol fence between you and the bed of the Colorado. Water has not flowed there in any sense in any real sense since the mid 1990s. All the upstream dams have taken every single drop away from what used to be, according to those who saw it before it started to go dry in the 1920s, one of the most beautiful riparian areas in the entire Southwest. And it's all gone today. It's a bed of sand.
Wow, I didn't realize that it's like, I mean, there's all these rumors, I mean, like the Salt River, about the POWs that escaped from Papago Park and went to go find the river and couldn't find it. And so
that was the Gila River, actually.
I'm sorry?
That was the Gila River that they saw on the map.
Oh, the Gila River. Okay. Yeah. And so tried to get there and get on a boat and go down it. And it's just kind of disconcerting to kind of hear that. I mean, as we're in the midst of talking about water, that in the 20s, there was this lush green area that is not anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's a mixed bag. It's easy to kind of get moralistic and think, wow, we've turned off our rivers in Arizona. But Arizona wouldn't exist if we hadn't done that bit of hydrological engineering. We wouldn't really be talking here. It wouldn't be the state it is today. But yet we can also, I think, look with some nostalgia at really what a magnificent sight a free-flowing salt river would have presented itself, would have shown.
Right. All right. What is the name of the one uranium mine permitted to operate near the Grand Canyon? C. Pinyon Plain.
Yes, and the answer to this question would have been different as recently as 4 years ago, because it used to be called the Canyon Mine. This is an example of some creative rebranding on the part of the Energy Fuels Corporation of Littleton, Colorado, which wanted to divert attention from the fact that it is really close to the Grand Canyon, less than 7 miles away, if I remember correctly. And this mine was in the news recently because it's been grandfathered in to the new national monument that the president designated, removing 900,000 acres approximately of public lands away from mineral development, except for those areas which have been grandfathered in. And the biggest one and the only one that is currently permitted to operate is now called the Pinyon Plain Mine. No nomenclature associated with the canyon now. And it's also important to understand that not a pound of uranium has yet been taken out of this mine. They've sunk a shaft down to, I think, about 3,000 feet, but it is not an operating mine as yet.
Oh, I didn't realize it was not operating yet.
Not operating. Oh, not producing. Let me put it that way.
Okay, not producing. Okay, that's probably a better term. Wow. And so close to the Grand Canyon.
Very close to the Grand Canyon. Obviously, super controversial because the hydrology in that area is not well understood, and the idea of uranium or other heavy metals leaching into not just the canyon itself, but also the only water supply for the village of Supai, as well as downstream effects on Las Vegas and Phoenix and Yuma. It's a little worrying to contemplate, particularly when it comes to such a picayune kind of economic benefit that this uranium mine would provide. It's not that many jobs. It's a really tertiary supply of uranium. I think only 1.3% of the nation's uranium reserves are concentrated on the Arizona Strip. So it really doesn't make a lot of sense on a lot of levels, and the risk is very great.
All right. What was the last county created in Arizona? And you can see there it was A, La Paz County back in 1983.
Not just in Arizona, but the most new county, the newest county, I should say, created in the United States, and split off from Yuma County. Yuma County used to be much, much bigger. The northern half was segregated out by a referendum in only which a couple of hundred people voted. And there's a real shady story behind its creation, which I detail in my book. A conspiracy theory, unproven, I want to make that clear. But part of the supposition for the splitting off of Yuma County was to create a weakly governed water jurisdiction so that big Arizona cities would not have to fight the farmers in Yuma. As we all know, the ag economy is huge down there. There's very few farms or ranches, for that matter, in La Paz County, and what is now La Paz County. And so this was done just 3 years after the 1980 Groundwater Management Act, which made it imperative for urban developers to prove out a water supply. Paranoid cities immediately rushed out to buy what were called water ranches to secure groundwater supplies. And Scottsdale, for instance, ran out and bought something called the Planet Ranch, which is way up near Parker, really remote location near a burned out mining colony called Swansea. It's so much easier to have to do those negotiations on a local level if it's with a county of just a few thousand people and not a lot of ag power. Now, the fears proved a little unfounded. Today, La Paz County still struggles economically. It's one of Arizona's poorest. The government takes in a lot of money through leasing out its county jail space to federal inmates, and even that source of income is drying up. And so there's been some talk about actually disincorporating La Paz County, treating it as almost a half-century long mistake.
Wow.
Full stories in my book for those who want to see. It's almost kind of like Arizona's version of like a Chinatown story, like an Owens Valley water theft kind of a deal.
All right. So question 5. So who built the eponymous fountain in Fountain Hills? And that would be B, Robert McCullough.
Chainsaw entrepreneur Robert McCullough. He was not just a real estate developer, he was also a consummate showman. And he's most famous. Most listeners will know him for purchasing the 1834 London Bridge and having it shipped brick by brick to Lake Havasu City to promote his development in Lake Havasu, give it a kind of a strong visual iconography. Fountain Hills was way out on the bleeding margins of the valley when he staked it out in the early 1960s. And part of his idea was to recreate the fountain in the middle of Lake Geneva in Switzerland, to shoot out a powerful burst of water. I think, if I remember, it's 500, used to be 570 feet high. It's now slightly smaller. To whoosh it out with these fancy European engines and do so on a regular basis to, create some pizzazz, create something for people to look at. And, some commentators of the day, pointed out that this is sort of like, flaunting riches in a desert. It's a really powerful symbol of the hydrological reengineering of Arizona, that we are so rich in water that we'll create an artificial lake and we'll blast out this water almost as like a middle finger to the surrounding desert. Fountain Hills is known as the adopted hometown of Joe Arpaio, former Maricopa County Sheriff. Ran unsuccessfully for mayor in what may be one of his last political bids for office at the age of, I think, 92 or 93. It's also not a terribly racially diverse place, and certainly representative of, I think, a kind of a de facto segregation of the valley.
And they do dye that fountain green every year for St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, yeah, and it really is, something to see. It's maybe good for an afternoon, right? And on your way, play a couple hands of cards at the Fort McDowell Casino, not too far away.
Yeah, actually, just as COVID was starting to kind of release, we did a walk kind of around the lake with the current mayor, Jenny, and her husband, as he was kind of talking about some of the history of that area. So, all right. So, question 6. Elvis Presley filmed what is generally regarded as his worst movie, Stay Away Joe, outside of what Arizona town? B. Sedona.
Yes, Stay Away Joe is not only a really bad movie to the point of being really it was intended as a comedy. It tells the story of a guy named Joe Lightcloud, played by Elvis, who comes back to the unnamed reservation in a convertible red Cadillac and gets into all kinds of trouble, romances a bunch of women, tries to ride a bull at the rodeo. It's full of like really contrived fight scenes. A lot of people wearing what might be called brownface, to portray Native Americans. As you might guess very accurately, it's offensive. Even it was made in the late 1960s at a time when the consciousness of Hollywood really knew better than to do this. The ad campaign was really offensive, playing on stereotypes. Elvis himself does have an undeniable charisma. Like when he appears on screen, you know about it. But the movie is just horrible, and the contemporary Hollywood trade press at the time was pretty withering in its criticism of this movie in 1969. Now, to the credit of the Sedona Film Festival, they actually screened this movie. And I say it's to their credit, even though it is racially offensive, because they don't want to ignore this part of Sedona's history. Sedona was a movie-making town, and several good movies were filmed there. Jimmy Stewart's Broken Arrow, ironically, one of the first Hollywood movies to really take Native Americans as complex and sympathetic characters. John Wayne filmed there. The Cowboy Artists of America Association was founded in Sedona. It does have a genuine place in pop culture history, and this movie is a dishonorable part of it. Recently, the Sedona Film Festival screened it, albeit with a number of cautions attached to it and a Q&A before the program, which really tried to put it into some kind of context. So it's a curiosity at best, and it is a reminder that the movie making business was really very unkind and unfair to our nation's first inhabitants for many years.
Well, and I think it's interesting when you look at kind of the landscape of those movies, and now you have the Sidney Poitier School of Film out in Mesa, part of ASU. And so my hope with that is that they will look at the landscape of Arizona and tell different stories that have been told in the past, getting away from some of those almost slanderous Hollywood movies and telling a different story.
Yes, no question. And, important to say, Elvis himself was embarrassed by this movie. There's a song in there that he never sang again and tried to suppress all mention of. It's where he's singing a serenade to a bull that is reluctant to mate with cows. It must be seen to be believed. It's really a cringeworthy song, a cringeworthy scene.
And I also have to commend the Sedona Film Festival, because it's like I've done some stuff with them in the past, and it's been really great in terms of education. I'm sure they probably talked about why this movie isn't shown very much and what are the issues. So All right. Question 7. The man who wrote the song The Ballad of Ira Hayes is the son of what novelist who also took Native Americans as a premier subject? And that was A, Oliver Lafarge.
Yeah. Lafarge was a Harvard-educated Bostonian who, like many in his generation, took the railroad out west and developed a fascination with the culture in what was then, sort of the unknown backyard of the nation. And he wrote a book called The Laughing Boy, which won the 1927 Pulitzer Prize for fiction. It's actually a really good book, and it takes the DNA people seriously. It has, it's obvious, some flaws, and I'm sure that DNA scholars would take issue with some of what's in the book. But I was a fan of it. It contains a secret in the book that is rendered so quietly that a careful reader is going to miss a key part of what's going on in the book, and I won't disclose it. I'll take this reading experience from your own. But anyway, Lafarge had a marriage that broke apart, and a son with whom he later became estranged, Peter Lafarge. But the father and son shared an interest in Native Americans, and Peter Lafarge became a folk singer in Greenwich Village during the seminal days of the 1960s, playing in what was called basket joints. And he took Native Americans as one of his folk singing subjects, and knew the story of Ira Hayes, which was a well-known story even before he sang about it. Ira Hayes was certainly someone who was known to many Arizonans of the post-war period. My grandmother met him. His demise, as many know from alcoholism, was a well-known story in the Phoenix area. Even before he died, it was known that he had a bad problem. And Lafarge wrote I think what's a brilliant and bitter song about this, covered by dozens of artists, most notably Johnny Cash.
I mean, the story of Ira Hayes is, just an amazing story in the fact that, he was featured in the famous statue.
Yeah. The story of Ira Hayes in brief is that he was among the Marines who conquered or helped liberate Iwo Jima from the Japanese Imperial Army, and helped raise the American flag on Mount Suribachi in what amounted to a staged incident for the benefit of a photographer whose last name was Rosenthal. I can't remember his first name, but the photo, even though it was sort of a put on job, was telegraphed, telexed around the world, became iconic as a symbol of American triumph in the Pacific Theater. Famous statue, of course, at Arlington National Cemetery. Ira Hayes was one of the 5 Marines pictured in the photo, and one of the ones who survived the war but did not survive the PTSD.
All right. Question 8. The countercultural writer Carlos Castaneda claimed to have met his Yaqui mentor in a bus station in what Arizona town? And I like that word, claim to have met. All right. The answer is D, Nogales. Yes,
and I need to make a correction and an apology here. Castaneda needs an enye, a tilde over the end. That's my fault. And this is a controversial story. Castaneda was an academic at UCLA, and he, in 1968, began to publish a series of books about a Yaqui shaman that he called Don Juan, that he said he met in a bus station in Nogales one night. And it's this kind of romantic story about an older wise man taking a young Chicano academic under his wing and teaching him some ancient secrets. And Castaneda's submitted this successfully as his PhD dissertation. was awarded a doctorate, and proceeded to build upon this legend of Don Juan in a series of subsequent books, which grew less and less tethered to anything resembling Yaqui cosmology. And Castaneda's many critics questioned the existence of this Don Juan character, and Castaneda had enormous popular and cultural success. But there's lots of reasons to think somewhat poorly of this as a scholarly document.
All right, question 9. What famous soft drink was invented in Arizona as a booze mixer? And that would be B, Squirt.
Squirt. After Prohibition, Arizona's many orchard growers were looking for ways to market and use orange and grapefruit juice. And boy, I can think of one primary way that you might dispense with a lot of orange juice and grapefruit juice, which is to turn it into cocktails. A Glendale orchard manager named Ed Meehan, there you go, invented a fizzy beverage, or concocted a fizzy beverage he called Citrus Club, made from grapefruits. And this was just intended as a local thing to sell in little mom and pop stores, but it really found an audience and took off and went national, and became absorbed into a Michigan beverage company in 1970, and was severed from, at that point, its Arizona connection. But it is a part of the post-prohibition celebration and creativity with booze.
And one of those 5 C's, citrus.
Citrus, right. Whenever I see Squirt anywhere, I always take a little Arizona pride that, we can claim that one. As we can, by the way, one of the fake answers was Tequila Sunrise. There's pretty good evidence that was concocted at the Arizona Biltmore near 24th and Camelback as an improvised bartender's response to a customer sitting by the pool who, was sick of drinking margaritas and wanting something, creative done with tequila.
Right. And you can actually go there and order the original Tequila Sunrise, because it really doesn't hold any connection to that 70s drink called the same thing. Mm-hmm. So, all right. Question 10. What was Barry Goldwater's favorite cocktail? And it was B, Old Crow Bourbon.
I'd be interested to know who got this one right. This is just a really weird detail about Barry Goldwater, who did have a great affection for booze. I mean, he was known as certainly a guy who would crack open the bottle in his Senate office after the day's business was done, and just tell story after story. It must have been just a fantastic place to have gone. And Barry Goldwater was certainly a very rich man. He grew up in luxury in North Phoenix, and famously said, "I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, and I intend to keep the spoon right there." His grandfather had founded a dry goods store catering to miners, which his father Barron turned into Goldwater's department store. Certainly a state legend. And Barry was never much interested in the retail business, and primarily liked to fly airplanes, and came to politics a little accidentally and a little late by running for the Phoenix City Council because his friends put him up to it. Anyway, let's get to the bourbon. Old Crow, for those of you who know your liquor, is a really cheap brand then and now. The formulation has changed a little bit. It now tastes like pancake mix. But even back in the day, it was regarded as kind of a truck stop variety. But for some reason, Barry Goldwater really liked it. And if you were going to be drinking with Barry, it's more likely than not that you'd be getting an Old Crow on ice, as opposed to any of the top shelf brands he could have easily afforded.
Well, I'm sure there must be lots of places that carried it just because he was there.
I'd be interested in knowing that. Did bars cocktail lounges of Phoenix, in whom Barry Goldwater was sort of a frequent customer. Did they make a point of stocking Old Crow?
I might have a few old bartenders I can ask. That would be
Yeah,
kind of fun.
I doubt Barry wandered into the Deuce, but you know.
So my friend Anita, her husband, the family kept it at the ranch in case he stopped by.
Yeah, there you go. All right.
So indeed, so they had some around just in case.
Yeah, and a couple of biographers just sort of mentioned the Old Crow in passing. I mention it too in my book. I've got a profile of Barry Goldwater in there as part of an explanation of how the modern Arizona Republican Party started and where it is today. And for whatever reason, I just became fascinated with that Old Crow detail.
Well, and I think it says a lot about, in some cases, it's those little things that's what I really enjoyed about the book, was those subtle details of things like that I think, again, kind of help create that soul and don't make it to the headlines of newspapers, but just create kind of a subplot or a subtext going through Arizona. It's not always just the big headlines that make a difference.
History is an accretion of little details, and I try and stick them in wherever it seems appropriate. One more like sort of Barry Goldwater tidbit was that he loved gizmos and gadgets. He famously spent a couple of hours every day playing around on the ham radio, and the flag the American flag that he flew at his house in Paradise Valley, which translates Benunakin, he called it somewhat pretentiously, which translates as house on a hill in Navajo, or the Diné language. He had an American flag, which at every sunrise he would wake up and push a button next to his bed, and it would automatically raise the flag on a flagpole, just as sort of like, Barry's personal reveille.
Wow, I had no idea. It's also said the Goldwater sign downtown was the first neon sign in Arizona.
Okay, I hadn't known that, but
that was on the Doris Heyman building. I mean, again, that's one of my little areas is neon, so I'm always looking up signage and things like that.
Marshall, if I could take on a question from Sarah here.
Yeah, please. I was getting ready to bring that up. So
okay, yeah, Sarah, as I understand the term Copperhead, that's essentially a conservative Southern Democrat who opposed the Civil War, and Goldwater's grandfather, Mike, Big Mike, they called him, was not especially political, but if you were doing business in Arizona in the 1870s, 1880s, as he was, you were probably going to have some sympathy with the Democratic Party, the post-war Democratic Party. It was a machine that controlled Arizona. Barry Goldwater himself was a lifelong Republican, thanks to the influence of his mother Josephine, who herself was a migrant from Illinois, who came out to Arizona to try and cure her tuberculosis, as many people did in that era. And there's a family story that she actually had to walk part of the way down the Peavine Railroad tracks from Ash Fork to get to Prescott. But he took his republicanism pretty seriously, and never, mainly on sentimental grounds when he was growing up, based on the stories that Josephine told him about Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War and the party of Lincoln.
All right, I always like to end trivia with ask people how they did. I have a feeling this one probably was kind of low for folks. But, I always tell people, no matter what, you're a winner, because look at all these stories that we got. And if you would like more to this story, you can check out Rim to River, a look into the heart of Arizona. So why did you decide to take that trek?
Yeah, the book consists of 17 essays about Arizona, about water, about wildfires, about border crossing, I mentioned the Arizona Republican Party, the great novels that have defined this state, the rising power of the Latino vote, native spirituality, all kinds of things. Everything that I really thought was interesting and worthy to say about Arizona that hadn't been said before. And the governing organizing principle for this book is an account of a walk that I took all the way across Arizona in one continuous 46-day trip from the Utah border to the Mexican border, primarily following the path of what's called the Arizona Trail.
And Tom, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your passion for, and also your talent of really kind of mixing the good, the bad, and kind of weaving in all these different elements. I mean, that was things I really enjoyed about looking at the book, was just, again, those subtle details of some of the food that has Arizona legend and things like that woven into it as well.
Oh, thanks. Thanks.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up. As a real quick parting shot, this book has an explanation of what makes distinctive Arizona cuisine, and for that matter, distinctive Arizona cocktails.
Indeed, Tom. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your night.
Thanks, Marshall. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Well, Tom, thank you so much. That was pretty, I just kind of loved, if you haven't check out the book. You can go to the library, you can buy a copy. So, this is something you'll definitely want to, and Anita, I think Mike's family may even show up in this at least once, but I didn't want to say anything for lack of not knowing. And so, all right. So now we come to From the Vault, and because we chose to talk about one pyramid, I thought let's talk about Hunt's tomb in Papago Park. So Hunt was the first Arizona state governor. His tomb was built in 1931 for his wife. He later wound up being placed in there in the mid-30s, as well as his wife's family. And so there may even be the family dog is buried there as well. It's a Papago Park. It's got a fence around it, but it really is on a spectacular vista. So you can get a really great view of Arizona and just kind of the valley. So if you haven't made it to Hunt's tomb, now you do know a place you should go. All right. So now you always see why I say, if you're watching on Facebook, please click on that share button, because we have so much fun with Arizona history and all kinds of things. And so next week we have on another author as well, David Peterson. So be sure to check in next week, same time, same channel, as we get ready to say good night. Remember, if you have any questions, story suggestions, comments, please share them. I always want to give a shout out to Chris and Cole for that amazing video that started things, as well as PJ, my cocktail advisor, keeping me lubricated and even a little bit of Mexican squirt. And so as we say good night, we are going to hear a little bit about, let's go through, let's see, we did that last week. So, let's hear from Dolan Ellis, who we talked about. All right, everybody, I will see you all next week.
The roads between Tucson and Phoenix, it was paved, but it was very, very narrow. And it went through all these little towns, Chandler, which was tiny little wide spot in the road, and Coolidge and all these places. I wrote this back in the 70s. It's called I-10 Highway. Arizona I-10 Highway, there's a trucker going my way. Play a tune in the afternoon on a guitar that I carry on my back. I can see the signs of Tucson from the freeway that I ride on, telling me all the sights to see down in Tucson. But I'm long gone with each puff from the diesel stack. the crops a Pima farmer grows goes flipping by like pages in a worn-out history book. And the story that it seems to tell, the pride of his work and a job done well, the cooperation of a reservation full of neighbors, and the labors of his people that it took. Arizona I-10 highway, there's a trucker going my way. Play a tune in the afternoon on a guitar that I carry on my back. I can see the signs of Tucson from the freeway that I ride on, telling me all the sights to see down in Tucson. But I'm long gone with each puff from the diesel stack. Well, on down that Arizona I-10 highway, you get a little beyond halfway between Phoenix and Tucson. There you'll come to a pointed mountain called Picacho Peak. Up ahead is Picacho Peak. If that volcanic rock could speak, the things she'd say about yesterday and the way history unfolded at her feet. In the summer of '64, the only battle of the Civil War, fought right there in the desert air. The soldiers straddled McCulloch saddles to the sound of a bugle beat. Arizona I-10 highway, there's a trucker going my way. Play a tune in the afternoon on a guitar that I carry on my back. I can see the signs of Tucson from the freeway that I ride on, telling me all the sights to see down in Tucson. But I'm long gone with each puff from the diesel stack. Yes, I'm a long gone with each puff from the diesel stack.